Welcome, Dylan. How are you?
Doing great, Mark. How are you?
I'm good too. Thanks. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Healthy one, hopefully, for the whole year and beyond. And thanks for participating on our Leaders Who Care series. I think people will realize after we talk why. And let's get started. If you could just briefly introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, and then we'll chat.
Sounds great. Yeah, so I run a holding company called Voyager, which is vertically integrating space assets and creating hopefully a relevant space exploration company capable of doing essentially anything in space, including going to deep space. My background is actually running public companies. I grew up in the public markets, first in electronics, then real estate, and then later space, and really just cut my teeth doing that, running large companies at scale. Always have been super passionate about space and got involved in space initially as an early stage investor, and then made the move to space full time a couple of years back. Voyager is growing very rapidly. We're looking to go hopefully public third quarter of this year, 2021. And the timing for the industry is remarkable because everything has been essentially cracked open, wide open by SpaceX and the low cost access to space.
Yeah, no, it's quite amazing. Before we get into all that, what about you, your family? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Married for 19 years, two daughters. We live in Denver, and my wife and I met at business school at University of Chicago. Moved out to Colorado after that. But just a couple of teenage daughters and trying to navigate that whole situation. My oldest is going to go away to college next year. So
Awesome.
We have mixed feelings about that.
I know the feeling. I left two of my three sons at a high school prep. They got recruited to play hockey. And when I left them, I felt this hole in my stomach, like this isn't supposed to happen right now. I'm going home alone type of deal. So
Right.
It's quite a feeling. Before we delve into a little bit more, I like to ask, Simon Sinek's why, but I like to ask it in a different way. Tell me, why do you do what you do?
Well, for me, it's very very simple. Space is the only tool for transformation that I'm aware of that sort of has universal impact on human beings. Pretty much everyone who's been to space has been dramatically impacted and has come back wanting to do something significant to benefit the Earth and benefit humanity. Our entire environmental movement, as you might know, Mark, was born out of the Earthrise photo from the Apollo mission. So space has the power to transform, and I think it's the next big thing for humanity. So I'm dedicated, my whole life from this point forward is really dedicated to getting us to space, hundreds of thousands of people living and working in space. And we're right on the cusp of it. I mean, now that we have low cost access and a lot of these business plans now closed, there's a lot of exciting things happening.
Well, you make a great segue from my next question. It's taken us decades really for leaders to realize that aligning with some kind of social or environmental impact is not just about charity. It's actually good for business. It's good for attracting top talent who want to work where there's purpose and make a difference. So as a kid, were you as amazed as we all were about, seeing the rocket go up, seeing the astronauts in their attire, their uniforms, seeing what's happened when they go up to space, the discoveries. How do you see the imagination of all that, the travel, the medical discoveries that come of it, making an impact in that same way, not just on business, but also on social and environmental in the world?
Yeah. Well, I definitely was motivated by space, and I think everyone likes rockets and launches and all that. And I like exploration in general, like what's over the hill. But for me, Mark, it was really more about, I know it's a cliche, but Star Trek, the whole social harmony that Star Trek had, and sort of this universal, all races, all creeds, all nationalities were getting along, and everybody was sort of looking to grow the pie. I was mesmerized by that, and the fact that everything was so harmonious. And so to me, that's really the power of space. And you nailed it. I mean, purpose, to me, I don't know how you operate a company in this day and age without a purpose-led mission. I really don't, because first of all, to your point, you're not going to recruit anybody good. Nobody good is going to want to work in that environment. And secondly, I'm not really sure you can be successful because you don't have that lighthouse or that anchor to orient towards, right? You're just kind of lost in space. And,
So
I
to
think economic profit is a byproduct, not that can't be your mission. Your mission can't be, we're going to make a ton of money, because, that means different things to different people. And it also means, the how isn't specified in that. And the ground rules aren't specified in that. So I just think purpose-led businesses make sense.
It's interesting. Star Trek was one of my favorite shows. A little bit of a connection. William Shatner was from Montreal,
Yeah.
Captain Kirk, and I got to know him here in LA a little bit. And if you think back about their flip phones, you think back about, again, different medical discoveries come from going out into space. Chat a little bit about, it's not just about going up in a rocket, but so many ancillary benefits that happen from it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, famously, lots of technologies, as you alluded to, Mark, have been discovered. Teflon and all these different materials that were created for the space program. But a lot of microgravity research that's happening in orbit right now. A lot of people don't know biopharma companies are performing experiments in space. One thing that people might not realize is gravity is essentially a convective force. It mixes things together. And chemistry is all about mixing molecules together. If you get into microgravity, if you get into orbit, you essentially put it in a slow motion machine. So if you're doing biopharma research, you can actually understand reactions at a deeper level. You can run experiments with more significance. So that's a huge growth area. One of the things on space manufacturing that's really interesting is when you make fiber optic cable, again, because of gravity's convective force, you get these little impurities in the fiber optic cable. If you manufacture that in orbit, theoretically, you can make a transmission cable that's 100 times more efficient. So these are the kinds of technologies that kind of fall out of the space program and have real benefits here on Earth. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, climate science, without satellites, by the way, every business plan created in Silicon Valley uses the GPS constellation, right? Uber, you pick Airbnb, whatever it is, it's all GPS enabled.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. And I think we've talked about this. One of our good clients is Viasat,
Mm-hmm.
actually.
Right, sure.
Doing all the satellites and everything. And there's so much, with respect to people and their lives, with so much around agribusiness and growing and food security and water security, et cetera, that I see so much happening in your industry now in the future.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's really exciting. And, it's changing at an increasingly rapid rate. We really are hitting the hockey stick of the industry. So it's super, super, super exciting.
So I know you're not to put out any proprietary, but you're making some acquisitions. You're
Right.
moving forward. You're talking about IPO. Give us a little sense of where you're going.
Yeah, sure. So we're building a vertically integrated company really based upon assembling capability. So if you think of like a typical private equity approach, it would really be market share oriented. Like, how do I aggregate market share and ultimately sell the company on to someone else? We're thinking about it much longer term than that. We're saying what missions are going to be funded 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, and what capabilities do companies need to fulfill that mission? And so we're trying to, you being a great Canadian and McGill grad, I know you'll appreciate this, trying to skate to where the puck is going and anticipate where it's going, but doing it from a capability first standpoint. So our latest announcement, NanoRacks, which we announced our intent to acquire, which was covered by CNBC last week pretty extensively. That's an amazing company. They have the first private airlock installed in space. It was just installed on the International Space Station. And think of it as a large SUV bolted onto the side of the International Space Station, which allows free commerce. Right? You don't have to go through the National Lab System. You go through us, you go through a private company, and you have access to the International Space Station. It's pretty remarkable to think about that.
It is remarkable. And you mentioned Star Trek. It makes me think of Jetsons, obviously, and God knows what else. Go on. And we're talking about, autonomous driving cars. I mean, who knows before we're even beyond that,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and back to autonomous cars again, that's all going to be enabled by space-based data, right? What Elon's doing with Starlink, what Amazon is building with their Kuiper constellation, they're trying to anticipate all the high-speed bandwidth needed to enable these self-driving cars, right? It's not going to happen through the cell network. It's just not, right? There's not enough bandwidth, even with 5G, to pull that off.
Right.
So, yeah.
How do you see, another area that we're involved in quite a bit is education, especially digital education, and getting education to people even in remote areas that can then get jobs, good jobs from them, and not necessarily having to go to college because maybe you don't want to, you can't, or whatever. How do you see space impacting that?
Well, I think it's huge. I mean, first of all, just the inspiration it provides. But then the other thing that I tell people is, you don't need to be a fighter pilot and 6'3" male to be in the space race now, right? All different professions, all different backgrounds, all different ethnicities, and the diversity. But you can be an artist, you can be a cook, you can be a personal trainer. All of those things are going to be required for this next generation
Right.
push into space. So I think that's the key message. I think when young people are imagining their futures, imagining an eighth continent, imagining working in space, I think is mesmerizing to young folks. And they don't have to be an aerospace engineer to do that.
Yeah, I like the fact you used imagining because I think we lost some of that I think we had as kids with the imagination, and it's coming back, and that creates so much stuff. And I've actually talked to clients like Viasat and whatever. I'm talking to candidates. We'd say, "How do you feel about having your office on the satellite?" Just joking around, and they laugh, and then they think, "Wow, that's pretty cool."
Yeah,
Um,
right.
and I've also find it interesting, and maybe you can comment on this about every time there's an industrial revolution type of thing. Every time so lost jobs, you're alluring. You're saying there's going to be a lot more jobs available because of this. Correct?
Indeed. Yeah. And take Bezos, richest man in the world. He's on record saying he wants millions of people living and working in space, right? That's his mission. Elon doesn't quite put it that way. His is more the push to Mars, but by definition, you need lots of people to pull that off. Returning to the moon, building a moon base, private space stations, which are coming down the pike here very rapidly.
No.
All those projects need people, right? Need workers. And so, yeah, no, I think it's going to be very exciting this next 5, 10 years.
I'm psyched. I wish I was 30 again, but that's another story.
Well, that's the longevity piece of our technological revolution here, Mark. You're going to age backwards here very soon, I'm sure.
Benjamin Button, right? That type of thing.
Yes,
Um,
that's right.
okay, I appreciate that. Let me mark that down that you said. My grandparents. I always quote them on different things. They came from Kiev and had a little bit of an accent too, and they were influencers in my life. But they would say, as long as you have your health, that's the most important thing. And
Right.
they would
Indeed.
say education. So tell me your thoughts on this. We got COVID, major
Mhm.
pandemic, way beyond. As one client put it to me recently, it's biblical type of deal. You got everything from wildfires to technology still zooming along to obviously racial justice finally hitting a tipping point, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you find that there's potentially been an awakening as to what's really important, if only because we have more time to think?
Yes, but I get there a slightly different way. So back to space, I think the reason all those challenges have persisted for so long, Mark, is we lack perspective.
Hmm.
And if you look at space, space has the ability to change your perspective. You
Right.
can get out of the fishbowl and reflect on the fact that you're a fish in a fishbowl. I think COVID has had a similar effect. And it's not because we've had more time to reflect, it's because we see the interconnectivity of everything.
Right.
And I think that to me is we're starting to crack the consciousness to the point where we're getting a little bit higher up and we can see things from a slightly higher vantage point, right? The butterfly effect was a sort of theoretical construct. Well, now, I mean, what happens in a wet market in China can change the world, right? We've seen that. So I think so I get to the conclusion you just articulated, but a slightly different path.
No, it makes sense because you talked about before when we first saw Earth from space.
Right.
There's pictures of people around the world, all of us at the same time looking at it,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
incredible if you think
Yeah.
about it. We're
Yeah.
mesmerized. So wow, and it's really a brilliant point you raised because if you do take yourself out of your box,
Yeah.
what can you imagine
Right.
after that? And not to mention the energy and how that affects everything around us. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's brilliant. With respect to all the people that are going to have opportunities, new jobs, and whatnot, how do you see business leaders, or if I can, business leaders who care,
Mhm.
playing roles and taking care of their talent, their people? And I usually define well-being as financial, physical, and mental well-being.
Right. Right.
With all that going on, how do leaders um, play a role in making sure that happens?
It's a great question. I mean, it's not going to happen over Zoom, right? We've got to get back to interacting as human beings and taking care of each other. And, hopefully this vaccine is going to be effective, and hopefully the strains won't mutate and become unvaccinatable, if that's a term. But I think fundamentally, Mark, we just have to get back to the socialization. And then hopefully with this, as we were just discussing, this new perspective, and we can operate more effectively as a society. That's what I'm hoping to see. But again, it's not going to happen over Zoom. I think we've lost something this past year that we've got to regain here pretty quickly.
Yeah, I saw an interview with somebody who said the Roaring Twenties might come back because
Yeah,
it's all pent up inside of us that we just wanna go.
I can see that. As long as we skip 1929, that would be just fine.
Yeah, that's the point. Just skip that. So last little part on this, we talked about, I asked you when can I buy a ticket when you're going up, and you talked about that, your wife said you go first type of thing and see what happens. What do you
Right.
see the timeline of this?
I think both Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin will fly in 2021. But full disclosure, I said that last year as well. But I said that not knowing COVID was going to hit. But I think that, they certainly have the technological capability. Um, Virgin had a little bit of a challenge with a flight test recently, but it seems to be not a big deal, based upon what I know. So I do think they'll fly this year. Hopefully the narrative won't be, billionaire boys club. It'll be, hopefully they'll get some democratization, as we call it, in there. But I think, when everybody knows, I'm very blessed. I know probably 20 or 30 astronauts. I've got 4 on my own company board. So to me, it's not a big deal to know someone who's been to space, but for most people, that is a very big deal. And I think when their neighbors go, or when people that in their friend group go, I think that's going to really change the narrative around space and access to space, and get even more people excited about it.
Well, after I watched Cocoon, I was ready to go with them. So I'm ready to go with this.
Right. Well, good. We'll sign you up. We'll sign you up. We'll go together, Mark. By the way, there's another option. Some friends of mine now have this company, Space Perspective, and they're going to do the high altitude balloon at about 80,000 feet. So you'll still see the curvature of the Earth. You'll be on a gondola. You could be with 6 or 7 people. You can be up there for a few hours if you want. So that's like 75 grand. So that's like an African safari. That's not a big deal.
I would say, do you take a date on that? Is that a date type of thing, or?
You'd have to really like your date, but yeah, you could. I think it more like a little mini family reunion, or maybe a group of guys or girls that you're friends with, or something that would be, or like I think of it as an African safari, something like that. And by the way, if you haven't, you got to try the 0G flights as well, Mark.
Yeah, I got to try some of this. I got to get into it. Sounds,
Yeah.
me and Captain Kirk were kind of like aligned. So last thing, so with all that's happened, what are you most grateful for as we head into 2021?
Oh, it's trite to say this, but really health, I would say, Mark. I mean, I'm with you. I think without your health, you really can't fulfill even your obligations to other people. So I'm very grateful for being healthy, and a lot of great people in my life, and a lot of things to be grateful for. But I think health would be number one.
Yeah, I second the motion.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much. It's great talking to you. I'm super excited, super psyched about what's happening. So keep making a difference.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Maybe we can talk in the future after we've landed somebody on the moon. We'll hope, and hopefully it'll be a woman, by the way.
Yeah, but I don't want to wait that long to talk to you. So
Okay, fair enough. I'll see you soon. Thanks, Mark.
thanks.